Hello, BookTube. We are doing my 18K Q&A, and we are on part 3. And we are up to uh, Ars Lane Hadj. Okay, we're up to the next question. It starts Arselan, and it goes on from there for a long time. Hey, Steve, congrats on 18K. I'm a new viewer here, and your videos convinced me to read more widely, so thanks. Well, isn't that nice to hear? I have 3 questions for you. Answer the ones you want to. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Well, number 1, some books have the reputation of being understood only on a second read. Malazan, Book of the New Sun. Do you think that is a valid authorial choice or a flaw? Oh, it's a flaw if the book can't be understood on the first read. If your understanding deepens, if a reread is always paying you off a lot, that's an authorial choice. If a book can't be understood on the first read by an intelligent, attentive reader, then it's a bad book. There are no James Joyce's Ulysses points here for being incomprehensible. That's not a virtue. That's not a virtue. If you read a book for the first time and it's incomprehensible, it's a bad book. But if you comprehend it the first time and you get a lot out of it every other time, well, that's probably the author's choice. Number 2, you often argue that Dude Bro Lit engages a different area of the brain than other literature. Isn't this criticism also applicable to most fast-paced, not Dude Bro books in science fiction, fantasy, thrillers? No. No, it's not. Nope. Those are books. They're actually reading. Whereas Dude Bro literature is not. It's not even reading. It's a different part of your brain. It'll light up in an EKG with visual stimulation about those YouTube videos or Instagram stories that you might have seen where somebody mounts a camera on the edge of one of some sort of ride, a deep roller coaster ride, and you're following along as it's twisting and turning at a mile an hour, or when somebody puts a GoPro on their camera and takes an all-terrain bike and rides down a pencil-thin road through forests, over logs, all that sort of stuff. That feeling is what Dude Bro reading is. So it's not reading at all. It's a different part of the brain. Number 3, what is your opinion on Norton Critical Editions? What do you recommend for casual readers who are looking for critical analysis of what they read? Norton Critical Editions are great. If you're looking for grounding, historical analysis, that sort of thing, they're wonderful. Because they give you everything. So if you're, I don't know, you do a Norton Critical Edition of Hamlet, if it's old enough. You wouldn't want a modern Norton Critical Edition of Hamlet, but an older Norton Critical of Hamlet will give you what is most likely to be Shakespeare's historical sources for the story of Hamlet. It'll give you the earliest known critical responses to Hamlet, whether it's Samuel Pepys or the like or anything like that. And it'll give you really good analytical essays from the last 400 years, plus a very thoroughly annotated version of the play. That's great. They're a schoolroom in their own. The good Norton Criticals are a schoolroom in their own. Miranda Hayes says, what is it you do when you disappear for a while at the turn of the year? You make it sound so mysterious. I don't mean to make it sound mysterious, but I've learned from long experience that it cannot be described. I cannot explain it. I'm not meaning to make it sound mysterious. That's not the reason that I don't go into detail. It's that I can't explain it. But I will be gone, and I might be back. You never know. Let's see here. 2 readers it may concern. Good Lord. I know you've traveled the world. Has there ever been a book that comes close to capturing the feel of a city for you? No. J. Scott Phillips. How about a blob watch? Well, I'm reading the questions on the iPad, so I can't really. Can I blob watch on my phone? Have I ever done that before? Well, the phone's almost out of power because I never use it. And I don't know that I even have. No, I don't. I can't do a blob watch. I don't think I can. Let's try this one. Different iPad. Although I'd be willing to bet that New England will be clean as a bell. I don't think we have any weather coming up at all. I think the next weather disturbance we will get of any kind will be whatever tropical storm or Hurricane Ernesto turns into, which is not going to affect you on the West Coast, so it's not going to affect me either. Yeah, New England is completely clear. I don't think this stuff's all going to go out to sea. So I don't think we're going to get anything for a good long time. I don't think there's any kind of... there are no blobs to watch, no interesting blobs. I think the next interesting blob for this area will be Ernesto. Let's see here. Justice and Metal. Congrats, Steve. I'm really enjoying your Pride and Prejudice read-along. Is there anything about the Keira Knightley adaptation that you think is better than the BBC version? No. Indiatman Is there a comic book, single issue, or series or run you didn't like when it first came out and now think is great? No. Albert, which of the sonnets of Shakespeare affects you the most? In the way that you mean it, I suspect none of them do. Marcelo Silva, hello Steve, congratulations on 18K. Thank you so much for your videos and very good recommendations. When you changed from book reviews to book selling and vice versa years later, did you feel anxious about the change? And why did you change? And if I could have one extra question, do you have any recommendations for books to read while traveling in Scotland? Well, when it comes to the changeover, this great changeover in career that I did, no, I didn't have any worry when I left book reviewing for book selling, because at the time that I did it, book selling jobs were common. You were not expected to work in food service. You were not expected to work at your manager's dictatorial whim. You had set hours, like they were normal hours. You got an hour for lunch. You weren't expected to work at 11 at night. You weren't expected to be called by a manager. You had a normal relationship, a normal adult relationship with your employer. So that if there's a schedule that's already made and you have a family member die, you go to your store manager and you say, I'm afraid I'm going to have to be gone. I have to go and attend the funeral and deal with all the executive stuff and whatnot. And your store manager will say, I'm awful sorry to hear that. Geez. Well, take it easy on yourself and let me know when you get back and we'll work out a new schedule. As opposed to in modern retail where your manager says you're going to have to miss it or I'll fire you. You're going to have to miss it or you're out of a job. With a straight face. Pure evil with a straight face. But when I started, that wasn't true. It was a normal thing that you could do. You could definitely pay your rent with it. You would get full-time hours if you wanted them and were good enough. It was normal people all around you. So I didn't have any worry about moving into that world. I really didn't have any worry about whether or not I would end up positioned where I wanted to be. I applied to a bookstore, and the woman that did my interview was nervous on my behalf. She didn't know me from Adam, and she assumed I was like every other employee, every other applicant, and said, well, it's a very busy store, especially in the middle of the day at the lunch rush, so we'll start you off someplace nice and quiet. You can work up in the children's section. And I smiled, and I said to her, I'd actually prefer it if you put me at the busiest place in the store from noon to 2. And she said, oh, are you sure? It's awful stressful. I said, I'm sure. And we used to laugh about that a year later. We used to laugh about that because we would go up to it and we would joke with each other. If we were in the elevator together or if we were in the back room together, we would joke. And she would say, I'm still trying to figure out if you're a good fit. Or I would say, I don't know. I might not be acclimating well. It was the change after it. It was the going back into reviewing and editing that I was, if anything, I was nervous about, because it typically doesn't happen. I was assuming that it would be pretty unsuccessful. Tiny venues here and there. I wasn't expecting that I would just be able to go right back to reviewing everywhere. Mainstream journals, private journals, free journals, and having a blast and getting blurbed on book covers again. I wasn't expecting that. So that has been a joy. Let's see here. L'Oreal in Texas. No question for me this time, but congrats on 18K. Watch out, Jack Edwards. Steve is gaining on you. Can you imagine? Look up Cenomics. Says, hello, Steve. Thank you for all the videos you make, especially the important bro watches. As someone who no longer knows where to get reputable news from and so stays away altogether, I was under the false impression that all was calm in the USA. However, I realized how wrong I was after a recent trip to San Francisco. I spoke with an old shop owner there who told me she and those she knows are all bracing for the riots that will, as she says, inevitably occur after the November elections, no matter which, quote, terrible candidate, her words, get elected. Is she correct? What is your outlook on November? She is correct. Yes. This is not about an election. This is about a seizure of power, which will happen at the local, state, and national level, and which has already been tried. The huge, huge forces of money and manpower behind the current fascist wing of the United States Republican Party does not care about the election. They aren't expecting to win it. They have a gibbering lunatic as their front runner. They aren't expecting to win it. They do plan to be in power in 2025, but they're not expecting to win an election. So yeah, I would expect a lot of trouble in November, to put it mildly. Bell Bottom Blues, unless unless the Republic decided to preserve its own life now. Unless the Republic decided to do that now. Unless it decided to do that 3 years ago, when then President Biden appointed a special prosecutor to go after Donald Trump for treason. That didn't happen. And a whole bunch of other things. A whole bunch of other things that could be done. President Biden right now has the power to arrest political enemies without any thought of subsequent criminal violations. He is a king. He is above the law. He could act now to preserve the Republic. He will not. And that, as I have maintained, that will be the number one mystifying question the future historians outside the United States will have about this time period. Why didn't the Republic act to preserve itself from known threats who weren't theoretical, who were saying, we want to destroy you? Anyway, let's see here. Bell Bottom Blues. Hey, Steve, congrats on your success. Have you ever read a fiction book about a family or a person with a setting in Boston? And if so, what is your favorite? Are you asking me if I've ever read a book set in Boston? I'm going to ignore that question. Who is your favorite actor/actress from back in the day? I don't know what back in the day means, but I think Lauren Bacall would be a good call. Or the greatest actress and actor of the 20th century, Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn. Albert, what is your favorite book from the Tanakh, the Old Testament? Thanks for clarifying. Appreciate that. Why? What literary, philosophical, for lack of a better word, or other qualities give reason to that? And which one gives you more joy to read for food for thought, the Old or the New? Well, the Old Testament would be the Book of Samuel. There's a lot going on there that I love. And as to which gives me more enjoyment to read, well, of course, I was raised in a Christian world, so it would be the New Testament. Action Kando, do you like Kingsley Amis? And if so, do you recommend any of his books? I do like Kingsley Amis. Definitely read Lucky Jim. If nothing else, read that. Lake Reads, love your recommendations of starter kits. They all work wonders for me. I love the novel Warlock. Are the other books in the series worth reading? Yes. Medium John Silver, are any Shakespeare's plays appropriate reading for Garb August? No. I'm thinking about reading Titus Andronicus while eating a chicken pot pie. Well, no, there's no Shakespeare that's garbage. I know it's fashionable in some places to say that, but no. Mac says, are there any short story writers who stand out to you as good recommendations for people who don't really like short stories because there's not enough time spent with narrative or characters to care? Yeah, there are a lot. There are lots of great short story writers, if that's what you're asking me. I don't know how much time you need to care about a character, but you can be made to care about a character very quickly. Mavis Gallant, Eudora Welty, Flannery O'Connor, Frank O'Connor, John Cheever. They will get you to care, I would think. Balin321 says, congrats on 18K. I eagerly await the inevitable 19K. This channel will never reach 19K. 3 questions this time, 1 literary and 2 not so. Do you have any recommendations for general histories about Ireland, specifically Ireland post-independence? Can you recommend a good biography of Eamon de Valera? Well, Tim Pat Coogan wrote a book that I liked, and I like Forster's book on modern Ireland. Big doorstop of a thing. Do you have any travel tips for West Ireland? I remember you saying that you spent some time there. Yes, indeed. I will be spending 3 months in Westport, County Mayo, volunteering in a hostel, and I don't really know what to expect except a lot of hiking. Yeah, ignore books. Do a lot of hiking. Meet a lot of people. There's no book. No, just do a lot of hiking. Meet a lot of people. Are you feeling more optimistic now that the Harris-Walz ticket is showing signs of being able to win? Do you think Harris will whip Trump in any possible debate? This is not about an election. This is about a seizure of power. I would hope that every Trump debate, if you want to call it that, from now on will apply the same basic rules as the last one did, which is that his mic is muted when he's not the one talking. Otherwise, he will just talk nonstop. And I think we all know that unless the moderators are from the Society of Black Journalists in America, no moderator from the mainstream media is going to do anything about it. They are going to abrogate their responsibilities. Just abrogate. their responsibilities. Anyone in the mainstream media is going to do that. They're simply going to let Donald Trump walk all over them. Without fact-checking him, without reining him in, without reprimanding him. They're not going to do any of that. So the least you can do is make sure that his mic is cut off when he's not being addressed. In a situation like that, where Kamala Harris is not forced to just shout over a ranting 4-year-old, then of course she would mop the floor with him. She can put together a coherent thought. She can answer questions. She can definitely attack him, but it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter. If she could easily whip him in a debate, yes, but it's not going to matter. Joe Law says, Steve, congrats. I'm curious about your take on September 11th, not from any conspiratorial POV, but how it affected you at the time and how you see it now, 20 some odd years later. Well, at the time, I was stunned, as everybody was. Obviously, that's a silly observation. I was stunned, and I remember thinking, sitting there in the room with my dogs, I remember thinking, this is going to unleash a huge amount of destruction on the world because of the current administration. The current administration has the biggest military any country has ever had in the history of the world. And this is going to unleash that, and it's not necessarily going to be fine-tuned. Of course, I had no idea how long and how massive that destruction would be, and also how blundering it would be, how it would really just be everywhere. Just devastation, complete devastation, millions of people killed. I knew that something like that was coming, and it was this horrible sense of foreboding as to what that would be. Let's see here. Foothill Element. Hi, Steve. Congrats on 18K. What do you think? What do you like about the 2 recent books about Tom Gunn, both his letters and the new biography? I love the annotation. They're lovingly authoritative. Both of them are. I love that. They will be starting places for any more colorful or rhetorical treatment of the subject. Paul at the Reading Tabby. Congratulations on your new milestone. I'm sure it's well deserved. As for my questions, you have often mentioned over the years how little sleep you require, and that always reminds me of Nancy Kress's novel Beggars in Spain. Confess you're one of the genetically altered sleepless children described in the book. Would you consider leading a read-along of this story, or at least discussing your thoughts on this book and its sequels? I'm curious about your views. Thanks in advance. No read-along. No, I liked it. I liked Beggars in Spain quite a bit. Ingrid Fitz says, what is your favorite genre of garbage for Garb August? Probably really rootin' tootin' men's adventure, provided it's not gross. It's a fine line to walk. This year for me, it's action thrillers as opposed to last year it was horror. Thank you, Steve, and congratulations. Rob O.C. says, hi, Steve. Congratulations on 18,000 subscribers. My question is, what is your single favorite episode of Star Trek, the original series, and why? I would vote for The Devil in the Dark. The Devil in the Dark is really good. But if it's favorite instead of best, if you're asking just a personal favorite, that would be Who Mourns for Adonis. Unpotted says, new folks find your channel daily, and some even subscribe, and some of them even watch future videos. Okay. One question. Considering your physical advantages, that is, feeling less pain than most people and needing very little sleep, have you been studied by scientists and or donated to sperm banks and or donated your body to science after your death, of course? Think of the army of super soldiers that DARPA could develop by cloning you. My sleep habits have been studied rather exhaustively, yes. Bonus question, were you in need of so little sleep as a child, and did this drive your sainted ma crazy? No, I had dogs. I had dogs with me. Thank you for all the time and energy you devote to your content. It is very much appreciated. Well, aren't you nice? How are we doing for time? Oh, we're fine. Good. User RF. Congratulations, Steve. Yours is the one I prefer. Best wishes from Mesopotamia, Iraq. Good Lord. Nasser says, wow, that was quick, Steve. The journey from 17K to 18K. Congratulations. I find my first Wallace Stegner this year, Crossing to Safety, and I found it quietly moving. Do you like his books? I do, yeah. If so, which one would you consider your favorite? Probably Angle of Repose. Also, I have been hearing a lot about this new Keva Akbar book, Martyr. Is it any good? No. Cremera Can Inns. Congrats, Steve. What do you think it is about the act of reading that draws you to it as a medium over, say, documentaries? Not to say you don't enjoy both, but clearly your preference is reading. This question applies more to nonfiction. I love how utterly enveloping it is. I'm alone with another person's thoughts. And that's just wonderful. It's just me and them. It's just me and their thoughts. It broadens out after that, because then I'll find out what other people thought. And I'll think more about what I thought, and I'll think about it in connection with other books. But during the initial act, it's just me and them. That feels wonderful. Leo Percara says, hello, Steve. Do you like the House of Niccolo series or Dorothy Dunnet in general? I do, very much so, yes. Also, when you happen to approach a wild animal of the canine variety, did you have to do it in the same way you would a city dog or a completely different way? Same way, same results. They have only one king. Mike Coletti, what periodicals do you regularly read? Oh my, lots of them. Online, a lot now. I don't get as many in the mail anymore. I just subscribe online, but lots. Mostly book reviews. But I have a print subscription to National Review, a print subscription to The Nation, a print subscription to The New Republic. Those aren't just book reviews, but I get London Review of Books, the TLS, the New York Times Book Review, and as part of the New York Times, the New York Review of Books, all that sort of stuff. Marcia Johansson says, when I saw you reviewed 2017 and liked The Weight of Ink by Rachel Kaddish, I really loved this book. I was wondering if you could recommend other similar novels that are maybe good or better. Congrats to you, well deserved. Rabi Alamidine wrote a book called An Unnecessary Woman. It's not exactly the same as The Weight of Ink, but I think if you like the one, you'll like the other. Unnecessary Woman is wonderful. Ryan Lisbon says, congrats, condolences. That Penguin sponsorship deal must be just around the corner, or at least the HBO show is waiting. Do you have any examples of a graphically violent book you enjoyed? I just read The Wasp Factory and surprisingly liked it. Satire of American Psycho I've always found appealing. I know you appreciated The Wolf and the Watchman and Every Dead Thing. Quite gruesome, but well done. Anything else in that realm you recommend, or maybe a number of good therapists? Thank you, Steve. You're in our home every day. Good Lord. I certainly recommend Dennis Cooper, if you don't mind being a little bit revolted from time to time. Jess Bookgirl says, congrats on 18K. What do you think is the toughest thing about being a booktuber in terms of uploading videos or anything with books? I imagine for most people it's the oddness of talking off the cuff. For me, it's tech. Even after all this time, the tech still feels like it could wonk out on me at any minute. The Spaminator. Jude the Obscure is one of my favorite books. What is your favorite Thomas Hardy book? Probably The Return of the Native. Sean Morey, knowing you read comics and books, what is your favorite literary comic or comic literature? I'm not sure I know what that means. Either of those variations. I'm not sure I know what that means. Would Eric Schanauer's Trojan War books count? Would that be what you're thinking of? I like those. Peter says, hi, Steve. Congratulations on 18K. I'm a Dutchman. So my question would be, do you know any Dutch literature, and what book would you consider the best? Why is it not Erasmus? Okay. First of all, let's be clear here that you can either ask the questions or you can answer them, right? You can't do both. But it's an impossibly broad question for a Q&A, but I would certainly recommend, once upon a time, Penguin made a book called The Penguin Book of Dutch Short Stories that was really, really good. I wish I had a paper copy of that thing. I'd certainly recommend that. Definitely. Mac says, what works of fantasy would you recommend to someone who likes the genres but dislikes post-Tolkien epic fantasies and wants something new? I've been looking at Stephen Erickson and R. Scott Baker. Would you recommend their works? I would. Their works are good. Anybody else stand out to you? I don't know if Fritz Leiber counts in what you're describing. Have you tried Farford and Grey Mouser? They're in the time frame that you don't want, but they're not like Tolkien. Maybe them? Grim Gone says, who do you consider the best English language prose stylist of the last 200 years in the fantasy genre and also in fiction as a whole? Fiction as a whole would take a long time for me to winnow out, but fantasy, I think it's Tolkien, definitely. Rumham, hey Steve, did you sleep an hour or two a night as a child? Any book recommendations that cover sleeping habits similar to yours? I did. I've never needed a lot of sleep, but I don't have a sleeping habit. That's my resting sting. My resting state is that. So I don't know. You need a lot of sleep. So a book that teaches you how to maximize the sleep you get is what you should read. You shouldn't be reading books about how to sleep less. That can really do a number on you if you're not wired for it. The Spaminator. Do you enjoy any of the books from the Beat generation? Burroughs, Kerouac, and the like. Yeah, thanks. I know what the Beat generation is. Thanks. I would say the only one would be Richard Farina's book, Been Down So Long It Looks Like Up to Me. Oh, that'd be the only one that comes close. Larry B. Darts. Congrats, love the channel and unfiltered thoughts. Sub for life here. Good Lord. Question, I'm intrigued by Harry Turtledove. He has a massive catalog and I own quite a few, but haven't read any yet. Is he worth reading? Why would you own quite a few if you haven't read any yet? Why would you do that? Does alternate history interest you? Do you have any Turtledove recommendations? Alternate history can interest me if it's done well. It's usually not. I would definitely recommend, from Harry Turtledove, I would definitely recommend The Guns of the South. Definitely, as a book to start with. The Spaminator. I'm currently reading Perfume by Patrick Susskind. I love it. Do you love it? I do love it. Maybe a little bit leery. I'm a little bit leery when it was first really popular in the United States 35 years ago. Because at times in the book, it almost seems like one of the reasons why the main character is so satanic is because he has a superhuman sense of smell. That was naturally a little touchy for me. Boon Tune. So my questions, feel free to limit to one if there are too many. Number one, ever encounter someone who read as much or more than you? A couple of times, yes. Number two, is speed reading worth looking into beyond cutting back on sub-vocalization? No. No, I would say not. Number three, is Finnegan's Wake a real book? Meaning, does it really have a story you can follow without half a dozen other guides telling you what it is about? I would say it's not worth your time. Congrats on your rise to ultimate influencer power. Isaac Randall says, sending my greatest sympathies for reaching the well-deserved 18K. I'll be equally crestfallen in late October when you surpass 19K and next February when you reach 20. Only God can protect you from the subscribers to come. This channel will never reach 19K. I came across an obscure text the other day and would love to know your thoughts. Have you ever read something called Faust by a guy named Goethe? Frankly, I'm shocked it hasn't gotten out to any coverage on this channel and to see it snubbed on your top 100 books, no less. But in all seriousness, thoughts on the Western Hemisphere? Rasmus, what is your opinion on the translation duo of Richard Previar and Larissa Volkonsky? I don't think there's a translation of theirs that wasn't done better by Constance Garnett or Mira Ginsburg. I could be missing something. I tend to agree. I think Constance Garnett does a better job across the board. They do have their dedicated fans. I'm just not one of them. Max, as you said in a live stream, that you dislike The Bulwark with Tim Miller. How come? Because despite the fact that they rail against the mainstream media for horse racing, for horse race coverage of what is an existential turning point in American history, a violent insurrectionist fascist movement wants to install a dictator. That's never happened before in American politics, and now that avowedly does want to happen. That is open. It's not a hidden secret at all. Which means you don't horse race. It means this isn't a normal election at all. And they rail against mainstream media for horse racing, and then they do it themselves. Listen to an hour of Tim Miller talking with Sarah Longwell. What are they doing but horse racing? And with Tim Miller, it might be deeper than that. Because once upon a time, he was a beautiful young boy. Beautiful, young, smart, roasting tobacco addict boy, 18 to 25. Once upon a time, he was that. And I know those boys. I am the world's foremost authority on those boys. They don't get anything past me. He's not that anymore. He's grown up now. But he was that once upon a time. And that gives me, I think, a fairly accurate look into his soul now. And I don't particularly like what I see. It's easy to call yourself a never Trumper. The scenario that I imagine is that somebody from the Trump campaign goes to Tim Miller with a gigantic suitcase full of $100 bills, full of money. Here is $6 million in cash. We're not going to promise to pay you and then welch down the line. This is yours. You have all the paperwork. We're giving you $6 million in cash. If you will sell our candidate to the swing states for the next 80 days. When I think about that scenario, I think that he would say yes. That he would do it. That he's a whore, in other words. That all of his principles are for sale, and that he would just justify it by doing a podcast with Charlie Sykes the next day and saying, well, you know, I've got a family to support. He's not going to win anyway. All sorts of rationalization. Now, if I'm wrong about that, if that scenario happened and Tim Miller would say, no, absolutely not, go F yourself, then I'm misjudging him. But I don't think I am. And that bothers me even apart from the horse racing. But anyway, I still watch. Uh, let's see here. Casper Constant Reader, if you had to guess what topic or person you have studied the most and why is it Erasmus? It would probably be Erasmus. Alex Hardy, I forgot another question. Any favorite volumes of the Yale English Monarch series? Favorite volumes? No. I love the series. I love their editorial standards. There really are no duds at all. But I don't have a favorite one. Let's see here. Justice and Metal, Toni Morrison's best book and her worst. I'm really not a person to judge. I'm really not. I know she's worshipped and read and loved and beloved, but I think her books are much of a muchness. I like a couple of the later books. I think get very convincingly poetic in a way that other critics did not see. Mercy, for instance. But I don't think enough of them to care to have an estimate of best or worst. Mike Coletti says, where's the best place in Boston for calzones? I'm a little biased on the subject, thank you. ST, what do you think of the controversial French author Michel Houellebecq? And which controversial author do you personally like? I don't like Houellebecq, and I don't like any controversial author that I know of. Dead Poet says favorite historian and military writer. Favorite historian would probably be Samuel Eliot Morison. And I guess he counts as a military writer. He did more military history than anybody. So I don't think of him immediately that way, but I guess he counts. Mac says, who are some intelligent and fascinating Christian writers like David Bentley Hart and N.T. Wright? The list is way too long. Certainly Christian Wyman. I would definitely include Christian Wyman on that list. The Spaminator. Bwahaha, the return of the Spaminator, the respamming. Wait, I can do better. The return of the Spaminator, don't go back to Spam Lake. Wait, the return of the Spaminator, Revelations. Anyway, Ulysses didn't make the cut of your 100 greatest books. Rightly so. How do I convince you lovers of Ulysses that it's dumb? Probably there's no convincing them. Michael Lombardo. In an interview, historian David Starkey blames mass migration for unrest in the UK and suggested an authoritarian government was the solution. He would, wouldn't he? The people who suggest that always assume that they will be Lord Cecil. They always assume that they will be in the council chamber. They always assume that they won't be on the business end of the authoritarian regime they're calling in. These bloated intellectuals who have no use, they would have no use in an authoritative regime. They would be in the organ donation bank in a minute. Is the melting pot of America an outdated concept? No, it's not. Isaac Randall, sorry, I remembered I have a real non-Faust question. I think you've recommended David Bentley Hart's translation of the New Testament here before, and I saw his name on your best non-fiction list a few years back. His take on Christian theology intrigues me, but I've heard his writing gets a bit bloated. Whose doesn't, except for mine? How do you rate him as a prose stylist? He can be very good. He's worth your time. And if I'm allowed one more question, would you say he deserves his reputation as one of the most important contemporary Christian intellectuals, insofar as that's a category you consider? Yes, I would. I would rank him highly in that group. That group doesn't have a whole lot of stellar stars to recommend it, but I would rank him highly. Captain 8291. Hi Steve, Steve Bronstein here. Are you excited with the Tim Walz VP pick? And do you think small dollar donations to the ticket will compete with Trump's billionaire donors? Well, Trump's billionaire donors want to run the country, and they know that they can if he wins. If he seizes power, they'll be in charge. They think. They're wrong. They're not reading 1930s Germany. They think they'll be able to control this monster when actually he's just going to take their companies. But his billionaire donors seem to be leaving him, or they seem to be a lot more questioning than they were a month ago. Duffy Pratt says, my condolences on 18K. I hope you'll be able to hold up under the distress of the inevitable 20K. This channel will never reach 20K. What's your opinion of Dorothy Dunnett? She's great. Do you prefer the Lyman Chronicles or the House of Niccolo? The House of Niccolo for me. Rasmus says, what is the best biography of U.S. Vice President who never became president? I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue. Probably there's a trick question there somewhere, a trick answer, but I don't have any list off the top of my head. Mike Coletti, have you had more real life adventures than Michael K. Vaughan? We've had lots of adventures, each of us, his different from mine. I've never carried a gun anywhere. We've had adventures each to our own. I'm also a lot older than he is, so maybe more numerically I've had more. Michael Lib K. Hi, Steve. You love Star Trek and you love making lists, so why not make a list of Star Trek writers and series that are top good and which are garbage? I haven't read that much, but I remember I loved Star Trek Destiny, which explained where the Borg came from, at least in my opinion. But I didn't like the Titan Riker books at all. Maybe you can recommend some books. Surely I do not need... I have done a huge number of videos on Star Trek full of recommendations and pans. More Star Trek content than any booktuber. That's not hard to find. Justice and Metal says, have you always been a lifelong Boston Bruins fan? Who is your favorite player? What are the Bruins again? Are they the one with the basket? What are the Bruins again? Which one are they? Let's see here. Sadra Gulshan. Okay, Sadra Gulshan. You asked 51 questions for this Q&A, which is psychotic behavior. So as you might have noticed by now, I'm ignoring all but 2 of your questions. I picked 2 at random. So I'll read these 2. These are the only ones here. So the first one is, I'd like to read all of Shakespeare. Which work should I start with? Should I proceed? It really doesn't matter. I know there are people who say that you should read Shakespeare in the best conjectured order of composition, but that is only conjecture. I would say far better would be to pick the kind of Shakespeare thing that you most like. Are you much more into tragedies and comedies? Do the histories leave you cold? I would concentrate on the ones, the kind of Shakespeare that you respond to the most. Read that and read that deeply, and don't worry about the rest of it until you get to it, naturally. And then the other question of yours that I'm reading. How have your reading habits and feelings changed over time since, say, 20 years ago? Any difference in speed, preference, taste, genre, etc.? I'm a lot more adventurous, and I'm a faster reader. Practice and concentration have just gotten stronger in the last 20 years, so I'm a faster reader. Vice English says, can you think of a situation where ebook piracy is justified? Sure. I can think of plenty. I Love Asuka says, most people think Faulkner is the greatest Southern writer. Since you seem to think he's overrated, he is definitely overrated. Is there someone from the South you prefer? Of course. Yes, Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty. Or can you not see past your New England bias? No, I'm a professional critic, thanks. I can see past my New England bias. I'm not calling Faulkner bad because he's a Southerner. Plenty of Southerners that I like. Excuse me. He's just not one of them. That's all. Arthur Odell says, number 1, is there a good biography of Erasmus that you would recommend? There are plenty of good biographies of Erasmus. I would suggest, Roland Baton did a really good book on Erasmus. That would probably be a good place to start. At least that's not in translation. Most of the really great Erasmus biographies, you would have to read in another language, or you'd have to read a translator, which adds another person to the call. And number 2, are you looking forward to James Gunn's Superman movie coming out next year? No, not at all. It's coming out from Hollywood, so we already know what it's going to be. I don't know the identity and the name of the little girl, the 5-foot-tall, 18-year-old girl who will save Superman at the end of the movie. I don't know her name or her character, but I know that's going to happen, and so do you. Beyond a shadow of doubt, you know that's going to happen. So no, I'm not looking forward to it, and I won't watch it either. I think we need an epic Comic Book Wednesday discussion on comic book movies. That would be wonderful. I'm all up for that. Alex Everlee says, would you rather be stuck in an hour at a Trump rally or in a bad slam poetry open mic? Slam poetry. The Spaminator, what is the most overrated movie ever made in your opinion? Pick a Quentin Tarantino movie. Any Quentin Tarantino movie. And lastly, books for Eric. That's what I went long because we're in the last segment here. What's your favorite candy bar and why? Here I am, a traditionalist. That would be a Hershey bar. No nuts, no nothing. Just a Hershey bar. A great big Hershey bar. And there you go. Those are the questions for 18K. We got it done in 3. And I'm immensely grateful for this. I really am. I know I say this every time, but I want to end this. I want to wrap this up by thanking you all for being here, for talking with me about books on all these different subjects that we bash back and forth. It's so much fun. It is so much fun that I just want to thank you. That's all. And I have this opportunity. I'll take this opportunity to do it, especially since we're never going to have a 19K Q&A because this channel is never, in fact, going to reach 19K. So better that we do it now. But anyway, I'll be talking to you in the videos anyway. So I'll see you all there. Thank you very much for the questions. And I'll talk to you next time. Thank you, BookTube.